Hi, my name is James Cook. I'm with the University of Maine at Augusta, and today we're going to be looking at a number of books. We're going to be using books as a model for how to engage in inductive reasoning about variables. And then we're going to take a look at a second set of books after we do inductive reasoning, generating a theory, to test that theory by creating a hypothesis that serves as a prediction for the future. Now, to do that, we're going to look at a software package called Microsoft Excel, which is part of the Microsoft Office suite. If you're a student of mine at the University of Maine at Augusta, congratulations, you can get Microsoft Office for free. And you can do that by going to my.uma.edu and following directions there, or by looking at my course syllabus, which contains instructions on how to get Microsoft Office. Once you have Microsoft Office and you have it downloaded, you can start up Microsoft Office, and you can notice that it involves a set of boxes. Now, these boxes are organized into columns, which we will think of in terms of variables. Our variables will be in columns, and our particular observations for particular books will be in rows. Now, when we start this inductive process, we're really just looking at books and their characteristics and thinking about what kinds of variation they might have. So for my initial set of 5 books, I noticed there are some differences in color, there's some differences in thickness, there's certainly some differences in their names. I also see authors. The authors have different genders, and I can enter those. And I noticed that some titles, like this one, are, they're pretty long, deceptively. This one looks kind of short, but then there's a little tiny print to continue the title. Whereas this one has just three words in the title. That's not much. So I can think about all of these as variables, quantities that vary. Title length, author gender, name, whether it's fiction or nonfiction. And I can measure these. Remember, the variables will be in columns, and my rows will contain a book apiece, because my books are my case. Let's fast forward ahead and see how I am going through the process of writing these down in Microsoft Excel. And an introduction to exponential random graph modeling. Let's write that down. An introduction by Janine Harris, a feminine gendered name. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 words long, and that is a work of nonfiction. And finally, Ethan Zuckerman, that's a masculine name, and the book I have here is Digital Cosmopolitans in the Age of Connection, Rewire. Rewire is the main name. Digital Cosmopolitans in the Age of Connection. Okay, that is a work of nonfiction. And we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 words long. Now, I've made my initial observation. It's a small set. It's allowed me to play with some variables that I've noticed and I think might be interesting to look at. And now I can begin to just look for some kind of variation that I think might be suggestive. In inductive work, we're not trying to generalize to the whole world.
we're trying to just open our eyes, see what's there, and think about what patterns might be there and that we might test in a bigger study later on. So, when we look at variables, we want to see a lot of variation in between one category or another, or in numbers, small numbers and big numbers, negative numbers and positive numbers. When it comes to the variable author gender, there really isn't much variation in my set. There's only one feminine named book in my original set, so I really don't have enough variation to be able to really talk about some ideas here, which is a shame. I just don't have that set of feminine books in my initial set of 5. So I'm going to have to leave that variable be. I'm just going to have to let it go. But I do have a lot of variation in the length of titles. Some of them are 3 or 4 words long. Some are 7 or 8 words long. And there is variation in fiction and nonfiction books. It's about half and half. So do I see any patterns? Notice how vague and exploratory this is right now. Well, I think I might, but let me measure what I've got just to be sure. And to measure tendencies, the single most common measurement that social scientists will make is a mean, or as you learned in high school and middle school, it's the average. So let's take a look at the mean length of a numerical variable. And let's take a look at overall what the average is, okay? So we would take the average by adding up all of the observations, 3 plus 7 plus 4 plus 7 plus 8. And we divide by the number of observations, which is 5. Oh, and then in Excel, in order to get it to calculate it, you have to put an equal sign in front. So the average or mean length is 5.8 words. Do we see any pattern? I sure do. It looks like the fiction books have shorter titles than the non-fiction books. So do you know what we can do? We can create something called a conditional mean, where a condition means, you know, just like, I'll take you to the movies if you clean your room, kid, right? That's a conditional promise. A conditional mean is a mean that is different depending on something else. Depending on what? Depending on whether you have a fiction or a non-fiction book. So we could take the mean length of a fiction book and a mean length of a non-fiction book. Okay, how would we do that? Well, for the fiction books, let's just count the fiction books. There are 2 of them. And so to calculate the average or the mean, we would add 3 plus 4, because here 3 and 4 are the 2 title lengths of the fiction books. So 3 plus 4, and then we divide it by the number of observations, which is 2 observations, 2 cases, 2 fiction books. So for fiction books, the average length is just 3.5 words. For non-fiction books, we could take the conditional mean, the mean length for all the non-fiction books, and that would be equal to 7 words long plus 7 words long plus 8 words long. And we divide that by the number of cases again to get the average length for non-fiction books, the conditional mean for non-fiction books. Wow, it's more than twice as big. Now, I've just worked with 5 cases here, so I don't know if that's really representative. I don't want to overgeneralize to quote Babby chapter 2 of your text, but it's suggestive, isn't it? So what might I do at this point? I might replicate. I might say, I want to see if I find that pattern again. But before I do that, I have to come up with an account. Why would that be the case? Why would nonfiction books have some reason why they would have longer names. Well, you think about it, grab a few of these books. What is this nonfiction book trying to do? It's trying to tell me exactly what this subject of the book is about. Why? Because it's very specific. Exponential random graph modeling. And not just that, just an introduction to it. Not an upper division book, an introduction. So it's told me everything I need to know about whether I want to pick up this book to study a particular topic or not. Okay. What's the purpose of A Study in Revenge? I think it's different. Maybe it's to suggest something. Maybe it's to tease me. What kind of revenge? I don't know. I'll have to look. Who knows what kind of revenge? Wow. Maybe I'll read the book. It's a different kind of goal. Here, the goal is to tease someone into a story. Here, the goal is to tell someone right up front what it is you're going to be reading about. And maybe when you're going to tell someone right up front what you're going to be reading about, it takes more words. Hey, that's a theory. And it leads to a hypothesis. And the hypothesis could be written as the following prediction. Non-fiction books will have longer or more words in their titles than fiction books. Okay, so I have a few more things going on here that I want to talk about in the hypothesis. First of all, we have a couple of variables. Okay, there's words in titles. There's fiction books versus non-fiction books. That's two variables. And there's a prediction. Non-fiction books will have more words than fiction books. So it's talking about a direction of effect. That's what we've learned you need to have for a good hypothesis, right? Which of these variables is the independent variable and which is the dependent variable? Well, the dependent variable is the outcome you're interested in, what you want to be able to predict. What are we trying to predict here? I think we're trying to predict the number of words in titles, right? And what are we using to predict it? Fiction or nonfiction book. So the thing we're trying to predict variation in, is the dependent variable, and the other one's the independent variable. So the dependent variable is title length. The independent variable is fiction or nonfiction as a book. Well, great. The next thing we need to do is we need to replicate. And when we do that, we can really narrow down our variables. Let's do that. So I'm still going to want to enter the name because it's going to remind me exactly which books I was looking at. But then I'm going to want to just measure title length. Notice, because of my theory, I'm no longer interested in the gender of the author, although for a different theory I might be. And whether it's fiction or non-fiction. And again, let me make this bigger so you can see what I'm doing. Okay. And let's make these columns wider. Nice and big and wide. Super. So now I'm going to go through very quickly some books. I'm doing a replication with a different set here. I have the replacement. The Replacement. Scary book, 2 words, fiction. 2 words in the title. Tom Standage. Oh, social media the first 2,000 years. Writing on the wall. Oh dear. Writing on the wall. Social media the first 2,000 years. Wow. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 words. And that is a non-fiction book about how social media has been around longer than you think. Love in the Time of Cholera. It's fiction. Love in the Time of Cholera. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 words long. All the President's Men, nonfiction. 4 words long, nonfiction. The Ocean at the End of the Lane by Neil Gaiman. The Ocean at the End of the Lane. The Ocean at the End of the Lane. 8 words long, fiction book. Twitter, 1 word. A nonfiction book. That's a very succinct title, isn't it? The Fellowship of the Ring. One, two, three, four, 5 words long. And, oh, that's fiction. Chaos, Making a New Science. Chaos, Making a New Science by James Gleick. 3, 4, 5 words long, and that's a nonfiction book. Essential World Atlas. Big book, small title. Essential World Atlas. Just 3 words, and that's a nonfiction book. And then finally, So Long and Thanks for All the Fish. So Long and Thanks for All the Fish. 8 words long by Douglas Adams. Funny book, and it is a work of fiction. Now I have a set of books that I can use to test a hypothesis. I already have the hypothesis, and I already have a theory about what fiction books are interested in doing and non-fiction books. I can test my theory and find out if my hypothesis, which is based on the theory that non-fiction books will have more words in their titles than fiction books, I can find out whether that's true. And I can do that through means again. First, we could have the overall mean, the overall average. That would be equal to 2 plus 11 plus 6 plus 4 plus 8 plus 1 plus 5 plus 5 plus 3 plus 8. That is divided by 10 because there are 10 books. The average book has 5.3 words in its title. Well, but what about our conditional mean? There are different conditions, right? Fiction versus non-fiction book. So let's take a look at the mean length for a fiction book. And let's see. Well, that's a fiction book, that's a fiction book, fiction book, fiction book, fiction book. So I'm going to enter those numbers. Equals 2 plus 6 plus 8 plus 5 plus 8 divided by 5 because there are 5 fiction books. Oh, the mean length of a fiction book is 5.8 words long. What about the mean length of a non-fiction book? Well, to figure that out, I would just type in all those numbers for non-fiction books, all their title lengths. And that is 11, that's a long one, plus 4, plus 1, wow, plus 5, plus 3, a few short ones. Divide that by 5. Oh, in my replication, the non-fiction books actually, on average, have fewer titles than fiction books, which is the opposite of the hypothesis I generated from my exploratory inductive study. What does that tell me? Well, it tells me a few things. It tells me that replication is valuable. Just because you have one study that seems to show something doesn't mean that it's generally true for all cases, for all books. And second, it shows me that when Earl Babby talks about the problem of overgeneralizing from a small number of cases, say just 5 books, he wasn't kidding. It looked like a big pattern here in my original inductive study, but it's not a big pattern here in my replication. Now, 10 is a small number of books in this example for my replication, but it's showing the process, and that's the goal. Now I want you to do the same thing. I want you to go out and I want you to make some measurements. In the case of your assignment, I want you to look at motor vehicles in parking lots, 2 parking lots. I want you to look at some cars in 1 parking lot. I want you to look at the variables, figure out what variables are there, pick a couple that you think might be related and weave a story, create a theory. Then test that theory by making a hypothesis that you can use to predict what would happen in a second parking lot. It will look just like this, except you'll be talking about cars instead of books. Good luck.